So I'm Mary Young, and I'm running for re-election. I have served the city for 4 years already. Before that, I served the city on the City of Boulder Planning Board for almost 5 years until my re-election. So the election was in November. I was supposed to go off the planning board in March. And I'm running probably for the same reason that a lot of candidates are running also. One of those reasons that I think everybody has probably spoken about is affordable housing. And what I want to talk about is how I would pay for the affordable housing, because I'll bet few candidates have talked about that. And how I would pay for the affordable housing is I would use the linkage fee. How many of you know what the linkage fee is? You did? Okay, well, I'll go over it again because I only saw 2 hands go up. So the linkage fee is so-called linkage because it creates the link between commercial development and the actual impacts and demand for housing that it makes. So basically, it's kind of, if you kind of zoom out from it, it's a way of commercial growth being socially responsible, and I think that's a good way to think about it. You create impacts. If you're responsible, you pay for them. And so what we have right now is we have a $12 linkage fee. That is 1/10 of what the consultant's report actually said we could be paid by developers for. So they said we could be paid, actually it was like $128 and some cents. And that was brought down to $60 because not all people that work in Boulder have to commute to Boulder, so that made sense. And then council asked for 15, 25, and 35 to be examined by staff. Staff came back with a recommendation of $15, and in an unholy alliance, and I'll bet Sam used that term too, I actually stole that from Sam. In an unholy alliance between Boulder Housing Partners and the Chamber of Commerce. Why Boulder Housing Partners? I don't know, because they would stand to benefit from this. But they brought it down to $12 with no data. People have probably talked about data-driven decisions. With no data, no reason for why it made sense, it was brought down to a very pathetic $12 per square foot. I would like to see it at $35 per square foot. Google got away with paying nothing for the impacts. Yeah, sure they've paid $100,000 here and there to some nonprofits just to kind of, so they would have paid in the millions of dollars for the impacts that they're having. And I was just at another a house party in Martin Acres where people were saying, when the news came out that Google was going to come to town, immediately all of the houses in this area went up by $100,000. So tell me those aren't impacts, and tell me that Google wouldn't have been able to afford it. So that's one of the ways that I would raise money, and I would use it for keeping residents that are already being evicted and priced out of town, people that are living in mobile home parks that are seeing their lot rents go up and up. We could empower them with that money to buy the land underneath them and get out from under the tyranny of mobile home park owners. The other thing that we could use it for is to empower people that are living in condominiums that are getting bought by out-of-state companies, raised and rebuilt simply so they can charge more rent. And so that's what I would do with the money, and that's how I would raise the money. So that's one thing that I'm focusing on. Another thing I'm focusing on is small businesses. Small businesses, as you've probably heard, have been in the news lately. We lost Stars, we lost Perry's Shoe Store, and as I understand it, there's several other small businesses on the mall area that are just, their rents are going up so high that they're just going to pack it up and say, forget this, I'm not going to do this anymore. So then what are we going to get? We're probably going to get some chains that can afford to be here because they're basically lost leaders here in Boulder. So one of the things that we could do, as an example, is we could have a policy. It's called the Formula Business Policy. And what the Formula Business Policy does, it creates a use in the zoning code that is for businesses that have more than 11 other locations They have formula, architecture. You know where I'm going with this, right? It's chain stores. So basically what it does is it makes it more difficult for chain stores to go in a place, for example, like the mall. And what that does is it forces conversations between small business owners and developers and landlords to talk to small businesses and work with them to be able to stay downtown. So that's another one of my focuses. Another one of my focuses is there was a community perception survey that was done last year by the city, and it said that there are people in our community that do not feel welcome in this town. And so I have actually been working behind the scenes already over the last 4 years to understand why that is, and also try to make some changes in some of our programs and policies. I'll give you 3 examples. One example is the Public Participation Working Group. I had the city manager reopen that committee to make sure that we had proper representation on that committee. I had her reopen the Health Equity Committee so that we could have proper representation on that committee. That committee is still open, and I'm still working on that to get the right people in there. And then finally a parking program, a nighttime permit parking program for employees that work in the city of Boulder who have no choice but to drive. So think of people who work in hospitality, people who work in the bars and the restaurants who get off at 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, great, they get the eco pass, but there ain't no buses running at that time. So they need some way to be able to park their cars in our parking structures without having to pay 24/7. I did a quick back of the envelope analysis that said that they would lose about 12% of their wages paying for 40 hours of parking a week in this new program. So those are 3 examples of what I've done to try and make people feel more welcome. Tomorrow I have a meeting with an organization that regarding cultural appropriation. That's another thing that kind of makes people feel unwelcome. So I'm working on a lot of stuff on that front. And then finally, the municipal utility. The municipal utility is really, really important because it is how we can meet our climate commitment goals. There is no partnership. There is no such thing. If somebody tells you that there's a partnership with Excel to be had, no. And Sam would be the first person to tell you he was in negotiations with Excel. There is no such thing as a partnership with Excel. They do not want to partner with us or with anybody else. So there is no way to get past 55%, if at that, with Excel. So we can free ourselves from a vestige of the 1900s. Regulated monopolies were established in the 1900s, and that's what Excel is, a regulated monopoly that was established in the 1900s. It's a thing of the past. And there's still going to be a regulated monopoly for who knows how long into the future. We can't get out from under them. We have to municipalize. So it's not for saving the planet. It's for saving ourselves. The planet has survived 5 extinctions. It'll survive a 6th one. So if we want to keep ourselves on the planet, hey, we got to municipalize. So those are my top priorities. I have a whole bunch of others. And I think my lit is out there, and you can pick it up and also go to my website. So, questions? Yes, please.
One of the elephants in the room that nobody has mentioned is what will you do when if you get elected again, what will you do when the 35-foot moratorium for downtown building expires? And just how broad an area is it? What happens when it expires? What will you do?
So one of the first things that I would want to see happen is to extend that moratorium 6 months. When that was extended earlier this year by the planning board, they actually recommended 2 years, and our current council reduced it by 6 months. Staff wanted to have another 6 months to be able to do things correctly. And I would be all for giving them that extra time to come up with the right solution for our community benefit, which is exactly what we're looking at. And so that would be the first thing I would do, is not let it expire in June or whenever it's going to be expiring. It only covers areas that do not have, that are outside of Boulder Junction, the downtown area. and North Boulder. I think those are the three, Sen.
Yeah, Boulder Valley Regional Center, part of that as well.
So it only covers areas that are outside of that. So for instance, baseline zero is covered by that. And I would like to see us at least, well, that was my sentence, so I will go into another sentence.